Welcome to Real Talk with Life After Grief Chris, where we talk about relevant issues as it relates to individuals in grief as they navigate finances and the advisors who help them. We help clients in grief navigate financial matters. We also teach advisors how to emotionally and financially work with clients in grief through an unparalleled process. This week's podcast is sponsored by Life After Grief Financial Planning and Life After Grief Consulting.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Real Talk with Life After Grief Chris. In today's episode, we have a special guest. We are interviewing fellow Life After Griever, Daniel Kopp. Daniel is a good buddy of mine, and he is a fellow griever and a financial planner with his own practice. His practice is called Wise Stewardship Financial Planning, and his practice focuses on helping widows and widowers across the U.S. with financial planning and advice. Daniel, welcome to the episode, buddy.
Thank you, Chris. I'm really excited to be here and share in this mission of yours to change the conversation about grief, make it more accessible, and hopefully what I share will be a help to your listeners.
And if the truth be told, so in our relationship, we're going to go into some background about Daniel and how we both met. But my knowing Daniel and understanding his journey through grief really helped me in all facets, in my journey through grief, and my learning about others through grief, and ultimately helping other people. Daniel, I'm going to put a lot of stuff on you today, my friend.
Of course.
How did you stalk? I mean, how did we meet?
Google. So I was in the middle of the beginnings of my grief journey after my wife, Sarah, had passed away. And I was interested at the time in exploring the career change. So I was active duty Air Force officer. I had begun the CFP coursework. I was thinking about launching or joining another financial planning firm. Somehow I stumbled across you and I was like, wow, there's this guy out there who is working with people in this space. Obviously, I was first connected with you because of your personal story and what your grief journey had been like. And so as a result of that, reached out. And then also, obviously, your career journey as a fellow financial planner. And so I remember we had like an initial conversation back probably in late 2017 where you just kind of shared about what your journey has been like and been a big help to me since then in paving the way, showing a path forward.
Yeah, I paved the way. I like to say I was tripping and falling along the way. So I don't know if paved it, but I was stumbling through it at best.
Well, it's been a help regardless.
Well, it's my pleasure. Tell us about yourself. And you mentioned a few things, but tell us, more broadly about yourself and why you are a life after griever, so to speak.
Yes. If I back up a little bit, so I spent my first part of my career after college as an officer on active duty in the Air Force, but my first love was always personal finance. I didn't know that there was an opportunity to work with people one-on-one in a financial planning role as opposed to like a product sales or things like that. So that's what I did. I was an officer, but in my spare time, my free time, I was doing a lot of personal finance counseling, teaching classes, things like that. Ultimately, that led to me starting a blog and then somehow stumbled across this whole thing called Fee Only Financial Planning. The journey began from there. At the time, my wife, Sarah, had started developing some illnesses and things that required ongoing care, such that I became her full-time caregiver while I was still in active duty, and ultimately came to the realization that a career and the requirements of deployments and TDYs and just the busyness of active duty and being a full-time caregiver just could not ultimately sync up in the long term. So started making plans for a career transition. Like I said, I'd started the Certified Financial Planner coursework and was just exploring opportunities in this space. Middle 2017, her health progressed such that she was going to be moving into hospice, and we spent the last 6 weeks together just enjoying time together with family, and ultimately part of that was some deep conversation about what she wanted next for my future and continue on this journey that I had started with wanting to help people with money. I had no idea what that was going to look like at the time, and ultimately got out of active duty in February of 2018, about 5-6 months after Sarah had passed away. Then that gave me time to rest, to heal, to think. I ultimately took a sabbatical, about 8 months off, lived in an RV and traveled across 37 states, spent time with friends and family and things like that I hadn't been able to see much in my active duty military career. And then something extraordinary happened that God brought into my life. I met Anna on those journey, and a relationship developed, and ultimately we ended up getting engaged and then married at the end of 2018. I moved to join her where she was at in Boston and launched Wise Stewardship Financial Planning around that same time, incorporating now both the personal elements of my grief journey with professional expertise on the financial planning side. So that's where I'm at today. Now my goal is going deeper on the life after grief side. So I'm working on finishing up my master's right now at Kansas State University in their advanced financial planning and financial therapy program, where I'm learning to explore more of the past money story as it relates to grief. I'm working on some research that we published in the Journal of Financial Therapy here in January about specifically working with widows who struggle with this money avoidance challenge or belief that money is bad or they don't want to have anything to deal with it. So working to help my clients first, but also advance the profession through academic research. And I'm excited to be here and share on any of or all of part of that journey.
So something that I've learned early in my career is I align myself with people that are smarter than me. So Daniel said a lot of stuff in regards to, and I like to bring humor.
Yeah.
So Daniel's very well educated, as you can hear, and you can listen to his journey in regards to the thought process and his journey through grief and some of the things that he's done methodically. And he became a certified financial planner. He left that out. I'm going to interject that, which is a very hard element to obtain. And I'm going to say it's even harder when you're in the throes of grief, getting that.
Yeah, I didn't mention that, but I did have to take like about an 18-month break in there. Brain fog was such a real challenge. So I'd started the coursework in 2016, 2017, but I ultimately did not finish that until late 2018, early 2019. I could not study enough. So yes, definitely recognizing that brain fog, I personally went through that. It was a very hard challenge.
And I also went through the brain fog that Daniel mentioned as well. I chose to try to power through it, which didn't really work so well in my favor. I eventually did get my CFP designation, as you're all very well aware of. It wasn't without some stumbles, though. So, like I said, I like to align myself with people that are smarter than me, and Daniel is one of those folks that is a pretty smart guy. And Daniel, you talked about your journey, and you and I are both very spiritual people. And I think that has also connected us as well outside of, our relationship with grief.
Yes.
Can you just explain from where you came from and where you are now spiritually, how you have gotten to this place? Because in my situation, it was either a do or die. It was either I am going to not go on any longer because I've had so much happen in my life, or I'm going to find a way to be able to bring myself back up. And it was through other people and through the grace of God and through, my belief in God as well.
Yeah. That is an interesting way to put it, and it mirrors deeper or out. Going through the health trials at the beginning was certainly probably the biggest challenge to the faith. By the time that hospice came around, I was at the point where I had realized I had zero control of anything in the situation. And for me, that was a place of dependence and humility that ultimately allowed the floodgates of grace and mercy to come in ever so that much stronger when I was in the throes of grief after she was gone. So for me, God used that time period leading up to her ultimate death to shape and break me down such that when I was there struggling all alone now, that's when I realized for me spiritually, God's grace was more than sufficient. And as you said, other people came alongside. And that's what the Apostle Paul talks about in 2 Corinthians 4 and 5, like the comfort with which we have been comforted, now able to come and help other people. So there were those people who rallied around me, strengthening, encouraging me, pointing me to truth, not abandoned me when I was at my worst in that journey. Something that I will always, always be thankful for.
Well, as I am thankful for your friendship, my friend, you have helped me through some trials and tribulations, and we all go through some trials and tribulations. Even after your throes through grief, you've had others. And, my deep throes that are publicly known through grief, I've had other trials and tribulations, and we continue to march on and lay a foundation for other people. So I'm very thankful for you being in my life. So I appreciate, what you have brought to my life. And Daniel and I recently had breakfast, and I rarely have an opportunity where I can just blab ad nauseum.
Yes.
And so usually I'm on the listening end of other people because they want to feel comfortable. They want to feel very comfortable, and they want the situation to feel normalized. And that's what I'm here to do. But there are times where I need to just blab and, just talk about whatever's on my mind. And Daniel gave me that opportunity to do that. And, that's from his wisdom as well. And I think he kind of sensed that I needed that. And, he got a chance to, say a lot as well during the conversation. We caught up. It was a very, very good time. He was taking a pre-vacation. I won't go into too much detail, but he was here locally in the Orlando area. And so we got a chance to catch up. So I was very appreciative of that. And Daniel, I want to understand what our relationship has really done for you in terms of where, when you stalked me, where we first met and, where we are now, collectively.
Deep question. Good question. So one, realizing the language that which you used, I had not seen other professionals do outside of my grief counselor or people in the pastoral ministry or things like that who talked as openly as they did about their grief journey. So for me, Chris, that was one of the biggest lessons learned, inspiration points, where you used your story first and foremost to show people that grief is an ongoing journey. Like this whole idea of there is life after grief, and it's different and it's hard, and grief is a lifelong journey. You don't ever leave it behind. Your life grows and evolves and changes around it. But for me, that was probably one of the biggest things, because I hadn't seen certainly professionals in the financial planning space talking about that, but even just in general outside of, the grief space. So just normalizing, we as a culture in America, in the Western world generally, struggle to talk about hard things like death and loss and grief. So learning and watching from you, and then as your professional journey went along as well, like realizing that that is an opening now, and I have an ability to help clients and people who are in grief, but also to point to other professionals and be an example in this financial planning space of what can be done around helping people in that space. Those are the first two things that come immediately to mind. We can take it from there.
Okay. And I appreciate the candor. I'm going to take a step back because, we are financial planning professionals. And one of the things we kind of glossed over, there's the financial impact of taking care of a spouse.
Yes.
And it is a dramatic financial impact, which can slow down grief because it can sideline you because you have to worry about the other aspect of finances. And I want to just touch on the fact and, ask you some questions about what was the financial implication to you when you were taking care of, your spouse?
As a caregiver, it was more emotional, mental, physical than it was financial. At that time, I was the only one earning income, so it wasn't like we had a loss of income. I know that's the case with many people in the caregiving situation. And credit to the Air Force leadership that I had, that in the time period when I needed extra time to do those caregiver roles, they gave it to me, and it did not impact my pay. Incredibly blessed to have TRICARE coverage during that time frame, which was extraordinarily financially helpful. At one point, I estimated over the last 2 years of care, they probably spent almost $1.3 million on her care that we didn't have to pay other than small copays. Like literally just a lifesaver financially in that. However, when I was getting out, walking away from that TRICARE benefit, that made me realize so much more as I looked to the new family situation, like how do I evaluate that? So, a comprehensive holistic financial plan wants to look at like the risks that are out there with how much out-of-pocket costs other health insurance, disability insurance. We don't talk about that enough in this space sometimes, about loss of income but still needing care along those lines. And then ultimately for those later on in their life, long-term care. So it changed my perspective around risk dramatically. So, and Morgan Housel, one of the best creative writers in this financial space, he talks about this idea that risk is what you don't see. And having gone through this personal experience and seeing what it would look like when I had to step away, and fortunately I had the capacity financially at that point in time, but what if I hadn't? Like that could have been ruinous, not just the enormous stress that it was mentally, emotionally, physically.
And you brought up a good point in regards to risk of what clients potentially, don't see. And that's how we're supposed to advise them in regards to protecting them. And there are many things based on your experience and or my experience that we can see ahead for clients, and we can advise them and say, I've been through this, or I've seen other clients go through this. This is not a risk that you should take on. This is a risk that you should put on to someone else, meaning paying an insurance provider to take on that risk. So that's a very, very good point to bring up. Something else that you had brought up in regards to, our relationship, one of the things that you said that you had learned from me was, being open and candid and, how to talk about this monster that you call grief. And I'm very comfortable with talking about it, as you are. And one of the things that I did a couple of years ago is I developed this course, the Advisor's Guide for Grieving Clients. And I'd asked Daniel to take the course and, give me some candid feedback. And he, along with a couple of other folks that are in my tight circle, gave me some very candid feedback. And Daniel said that he's learned some things from me, and I've learned a whole heck of a lot of things from him. But Daniel, I want to understand, some of the things that what my course has done for you and your practice.
Yeah, and I'm grateful that you gave me the opportunity to take it early on in the practice because, again, there's this idea of personal experience is not enough to translate into success. And so what you were able to bring was a little bit more disciplined thought pattern and approach to working. The biggest thing that stood out to me going through your course was understanding how the different styles of grieving interplay with different communication patterns. And this goes back to what I was just saying, like you can only know your own personal grieving style for those who have gone this journey or watched other people, right? You're seeing their perspective or your own, and recognize that there are many different ways that grief can be expressed and then way people want to be communicated through in grief. So early on, just being understanding of the different styles of people that I would be working with, how they wanted to be communicated with. And then as they went through their various stages of the change cycle and understanding where in which interventions are needed to say, like be the encouraging ear, just the listening ear, at the same time, like the person who can come into that inner circle of a griever who still, sometimes decisions have to be made, whether it's financial or otherwise, and be an accountability partner for them that says, we've had these deep conversations. I know you. Here's your values. Let's move towards that. Let's make a decision here. So combining those kind of aspects were some of the things that walked away with in my financial planning practice and then personally as well.
I appreciate that. And the feedback that you gave me early on and continue to give me is invaluable. There are some times where I check in with Daniel and we are involved in a few organizations together. And I check in with Daniel if he's on the other side, kind of witnessing what I'm doing or looking at me. And I check in with him. I say, hey, Daniel, am I talking too much? Am I doing a little bit too much? And he's very candid. And there are times that I need that. Obviously, wives do a good job of doing that. My wife does that for me, but I know well enough that I do need to check in with other people to keep me honest and to keep me humble. And he does that for me. And I really appreciate that aspect of our relationship. Daniel, what's on the horizon for you, into 2022?
Yeah, some exciting things I alluded to earlier. So, as I've finished out some of my academic training in this world of financial therapy, bringing it into and alongside the track of financial planning. So, financial therapy, for those of you who may have never heard of it, is basically the study, the interaction with the emotions from our past around money today and into the future. For a very, 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 very long time, the world of mental health practitioners didn't talk about money. And in the world of financial planning or financial advice, we didn't talk about feelings or emotions, right? When it was very present and future oriented. We don't go to the past. As a financial therapist, I am not going to be licensed in the sense that I'm diagnosing or prescribing. Instead, acting as a guided facilitator, a conversational partner, a thinking partner to go through this, to use some specific therapeutic interventions that come from the world of mental health. Some of them might be familiar, like cognitive behavioral therapy or solution focused therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy, things that have worked, that have been proven to work in the world of mental health, but now we're going to specifically apply them to the realm of money. I mentioned the term money avoidance beforehand. So that's probably my biggest focus now, is developing some therapeutic interventions around helping people, specifically those in grief, who suddenly have to step into this role of the household chief financial officer, work through grief at the same time that they're working through everything is new and different and hard as they become the primary household manager around finances. So, traditional financial planning can address things like how much life insurance and what you invest in and tax advice, and or partnering with other partners like a estate attorney for estate planning, all that kind of stuff. But now this is about working and bringing into the past money story, the money scripts, the unwritten rules that drive us sometimes to negative places with negative money disorders that stand in the way. So, working, and right now, my goal is to build out a beta test track program, if you will, to kind of work on some of this with a small group of clients and then start offering that out to a bigger group and potentially even partnering with other financial advisors, financial planners with a client. So they'd stay their client, but I can come alongside as the facilitator to work through some of those past emotional issues. So that's what I'm excited about for this next year.
So you don't have very much on tap for next year, is what you're saying. You have
Well,
a
that was
lot
just
on tap.
that was just one of the things. I have more, but your podcast doesn't have unlimited time.
Oh man, Daniel, you have simply amazed me in the time that I've known you, from where you have come and where you are now. I can't, I can't even say good enough things about, how great of an example you are for someone else, specifically in your space, catering to widows and widowers and in the military space, and how great an example you are. And I keep saying that over and over again, but I hear people, talk about Daniel, how he's doing these great things. And I'm so proud of you, man. You make me
Thank
proud,
you.
like a little brother. Daniel's, he's a couple years younger than me, maybe 10 years younger than me, but
I appreciate that very much.
yes, he made me so proud of you. I want to brag on him, for a couple of things. So Daniel mentioned that he has his own financial planning practice, which he set out to do, and he's accomplished that. He's in his master's program. He's got his certified financial planner designation. Daniel also has a blog that he does every week, I believe. He also has a podcast as well. He was well ahead of me on the podcast front. And I went to Daniel as, kind of my research. And I asked Daniel, tell me about this podcast deal and, give me some pointers here or there. And he gave me a lot of good information and was very willing to, give me feedback in terms of, what I should look for in a podcast, technology, editing, sound quality, on and on and on. So I'm going to thank Daniel for a lot of that information. If you think the podcasts are good, thank Daniel. If you think that they're bad, thank Daniel too. So I'm being facetious, but I'm very grateful, for you. Very, very grateful for you. Daniel, how can people reach you?
Well, the best place is my website, wisestewardshipfp.com. My email, daniel@wisestewardshipfp.com. I have my other contact information there. You can find me around on social media, Twitter, Daniel M. Kopp, or LinkedIn, and then, of course, Instagram, Facebook, things like that. When we were talking about this issue of grief, it reminded of like, you're either in a trial or you're getting ready for the next one. And, echoing what you have said about some of those things, appreciating you, like what you have done is help prepare me for a lot of those things that are coming next, whether that's in grief or otherwise.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm excited for 2022 for you. I am really excited. And I can't wait to see, the other things that you are going to do. I'm going to be looking very closely, and I'll probably emulate some of those other things. So I'm smart enough and I'm old enough and I'm wise enough to understand that there are people out there that do things that may be better or different than you. And, you should take a second look at things other people are doing. And so, again, I'm appreciative of your relationship, Daniel. And so I can't say that enough. And anything else you want to say before we sign off?
The last thing that I'll leave our listeners with at this point is when you are working with people who are in life after grief, or perhaps when it's your time to experience that at some level, like there's internal work that gets to be done, right? And we didn't allude to it specifically in here, but having the pillars of your life set up. So I alluded to just a moment ago, like you're in a trial, you're getting ready for the next one. So your mental, emotional, physical, spiritual pillars in your life, like what are you doing to kind of strengthen and shore those up right now? And then if you have the privilege or the opportunity to work with somebody in those areas, whether it's in financial planning or a family member or a friend who comes alongside, like, with talking about this idea of objective accountability. Chris has alluded to that. Our friendship and business and interactions and things like that have certainly given us opportunity to provide that iron sharpening iron, that accountability. So if you have the privilege and the opportunity to come alongside somebody in their life after grief journey, like being able to have that relationship is invaluable to point out where you might be stronger or weaker in some of those areas, professionally, personally, or otherwise. I think this episode has given an excellent example of what can happen when relationships are deepened and strengthened over time to help in a variety of areas. So lean into those relationships in your life or work to develop those with clients so you can have those same kind of impacts.
And I'll just jump on the backside of that. I believe our journeys separately through grief were enhanced, if you can say enhanced, because we had strong foundations
Yes.
before we went through the journey. And there is no way for myself, and I'll speak for Daniel, to know that we had this strong foundation to prepare us for this journey that we were about to go through.
Yes.
So in looking back in retrospect, we were very fortunate collectively that we had this strong foundation. And I believe, spiritually, number one, and then number two, the family and friends and the support system really helped our journey to get here. And it's not Chris Dale or it's not Daniel Kopp that did this alone. It is a family, it's a network, it is a neighborhood, that helped us to get where we are today. So I would be remiss if I were not, able to say that. And again, it's not just us collectively, Daniel and Chris, that did this alone. We had a whole support system of folks that helped us get through here. So with that, I am going to sign off, and I'm going to say thank you so much for joining today, Daniel. I really, really appreciate you. And Daniel, I'm going to give you an opportunity to state your website one more time, and then I'm going to say a couple words, and then we're going to sign off. So what's your website, Daniel?
Well, my firm is Wise Stewardship Financial Planning. So if you Google that, you can probably get there. But the direct address, wisestewardshipfp.com.
Thank you for joining, and please feel free to share this episode with any friends, colleagues, or family members. See you on the next episode.
Thanks for listening to our podcast. If you are a client and are looking to work directly with Chris and or our firm, head on over to Life After Grief FP. That is Life After Grief FP. The FP is for financial planning. If you are an advisor looking to emotionally and financially work with your client in grief, or if you are a client looking to get your advisor's head in the game, head on over to lifeaftergriefconsulting.com. That is lifeaftergriefconsulting.com. Any related information referenced in this week's podcast will be located here in the podcast section.